What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. If you've been following anything that we've been doing over the last 10 months or so, you would know that victories among ex-members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church are hard to come by. But yesterday, I saw this. Leeds man who labeled church a cult not guilty of harassing members whose accusations were an exercise in pearl clutching. A Leeds man has been found not guilty of harassing members of a church who he sent letters and emails to stating that they were part of a cult. Now, he was charged with harassment and acquitted, but like I said, the significance of this case probably can't be overstated. We wanted to have the man who was acquitted, Lance Christie, on the show today. He had some technical difficulties, but a friend of his, a friend of the show, and someone that has, the background of this case, he's been following this since the beginning. It's really interesting because I've been trying to get Lance on the show for months, and even though his court case was still ongoing, I'm like, can you come now? Can you come now? And it would have been nice to have him today, but we have the next best thing because Richard Marsh is here. Richard, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, thank you.
Did that sound like an intro of a very frustrated podcast host who just realized that Lance couldn't come on the show?
No, it sounded quite intelligent.
Okay,
so
great.
Congratulations.
Listen, we just got off the phone with Lance. It's too bad that he couldn't make it. Can you please tell us the significance of this case and what it could mean for ex-members and members trying to get out of the church as well?
Yeah, well, one of the primary methods the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church uses to harass former members is by essentially what you would call a slap case. In other words, a lawsuit about some relatively trivial matter that is kind of conflated into some kind of form of libel or defamation or harassment. And sometimes the brethren aren't even, they don't necessarily care whether they win or not, because what they're trying to do is basically bankrupt the other party by stretching out a long legal case and giving them a whole load of legal costs. But in this case, the brethren clearly did hope to win. And what they were doing is accusing Lance of harassment because he had been sending emails to former members, to existing members, to current members of the church, basically, complaining about the church and the way it treats people. So they managed to persuade the police and the authorities to actually take a public prosecution against the guy. So Lance was not being prosecuted directly by the brethren. He was actually being taken to court by public prosecution on the basis that the brethren had made a whole string, possibly hundreds of phone calls and complaints to the police. And it backfired rather spectacularly, which led to the brethren being accused. What was the term, James? Do you remember what it said on the thing? Being nasty and vindictive.
That's right.
And it sets a precedent, because this case, which is as I said, a public prosecution, a criminal case, can now be cited any time the brethren do a kind of a slap effort and try and take someone to court. In defense, it can be raised that, look, this is a cult that is nasty and vindictive, and it uses the legal system as a means to harass people, to try and shut people up.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm reading the article, and it says that members wanted to criminalize Christie, and this is Christie's lawyer, I believe. It's perfectly clear that this is a one-man church. What that means is these people can't say why they found it oppressive and unacceptable. And what it amounts to is, I don't like what I think is hearsay. It was a really kind of admonishing because, there was, I think one thing that Christie's lawyer said was something, and this was the previous article, I don't have it in front of me, but it was something like, it's like trying to sue for assault after hitting yourself in the face.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, the significance of the one-man church comment there is that this was one of the things that Lance has said that they took such offense at. Lance had said that this is a one-man church, and they came back and said, oh, we feel very hurt and wounded because you claim this is a one-man church. And then basically the judge come back and says, well, yes, so it is a one-man church. So, if you're calling a spade, why should the spade be offended? So, their objections, when they were cross-examined, when the brethren were cross-examined as to what was so offensive about these emails, it wasn't because Lance was saying the brethren are effing ... or saying anything that would be offensive. It was points of doctrine, if you like. He was saying, well, look, you're not really God's chosen representative on earth. And the church shouldn't be led by a man, it should be led by Christ. I mean, Lance is a very fervent Christian himself. He wouldn't disrespect Christianity. And this is what the brethren were claiming was kind of blasphemous and offensive. I mean, really, the brethren were taking a very similar line to what you might get in one of these hardcore Islamist Muslim countries on the subject of blasphemy. Their objection was that he had insulted the prophet, where the prophet is Bruce Hales.
They're apostates.
Core of their argument. Yeah. Of course, that doesn't fly in a democracy,
I find the hypocrisy interesting because
yes.
of the lengths that the church goes to separate people from their family members. Things that actually hurt, things
yes.
that actually do damage to people, and then they're like, he said things in an email that we disagree with. I'm wondering, how did it even get to the level of the courts?
Well, because the brethren, I mean, the judge is exactly right in that their whole effort is to criminalize someone. I mean, if they can get a criminal record on someone, then, of course, that has the effect of discrediting everything they say after that point. And this is classic tactic of the church, is that there's a lot of people who know and can say a lot of stuff about the church that's very damaging to them. And if they can't deny the accusations, then the next resort is to smear the witness. So if they could have got Lance criminalized, then every time Lance tried to speak to a newspaper or reporter or publish something, the brethren would say, oh, do you realize this guy's got a criminal record? And then the newspaper probably refused to publish. So it's a very standard tactic, and it's one they tried on me and on everyone really. It's slap.
We have legislation
using exactly. You got legislation in Ontario, which is anti-slap legislation, which is hugely important to freedom of speech.
One thing that I've learned, and I actually talked about, and if you're just joining us, Lance Christie, this entire podcast is about Lance Christie's case in the UK. He was recently acquitted after being charged with harassing 8 members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church by sending emails and letters to their houses that stated factual things that weren't, criminal at all. One thing that I've learned, I learned it from you. I've learned it from Carmen. I learned it from Lance today, talking to him. When I do these podcasts, I at the beginning I was probably a little bit more aggressive against members of the church and their beliefs, and I think it's really important that people understand that despite my lack of belief, I do respect the idea of an ex-member, the concept of a member getting out of the church and still wanting to hold on to a belief system within Christianity. I think that is probably a really important element of transitioning out of cult life and into regular life, if you want to do so in a way that makes you feel like you're not lost. Am I sort of striking the right tone on that now?
No, 100%. Yeah, I mean it if you simultaneously lose the entire social system that the Brethren is, and your family, and your belief in God, that is a very devastating thing. And for many people, it's, to retain their religious belief is a vitally important way of survival mechanism, I should say.
Yeah, there is a I've said this before in this podcast, but it was a couple years ago when Kobe Bryant and his daughter died in that helicopter crash.
Yeah.
And I immediately, for some reason, I don't know why that case it was a surprise, right? So that Kobe Bryant and his daughter were all of a sudden dead. It just surprised me. And ever since then, I have kind of walked away thinking to myself that I do envy people that believe in God during times of grieving, especially. I am jealous that I don't have something in my life that can somehow make me feel better in those darkest moments. So I do understand that, because the transition when you leave the cult is harrowing. You're losing everything. So losing your belief system. Anyways, I just wanted to get that out there because I know that some people have criticized me for sort of displaying my lack of belief front and center. And, I don't want to do that anymore. I want people to understand that if you believe in God and you're an ex-member of the church, you're welcome here. I need to make that clear just in case some people don't understand. So now what precedent that would this hopefully set for future ambitions of the church to become litigious with ex-members? Or do you think they'll learn their lesson?
No, it's they don't learn lessons. I mean, they've proceeded with a series of disastrous actions, each of which has brought a huge amount of negative, adverse publicity on their heads, and they carry on. It's bizarre. And I mean, the way I look at this, it's a characteristic of a system that's run by. It's very Putin-esque, if that's a word. It's a system that's run by a one-man dictator who lives in an echo chamber, and no one dares to tell him that, he's screwing up. So the way I can see this, I think the way this actually came about was that Bruce Hales was, in frustration with Lance's success in, condemning the church publicly, says, "Sue the bastard." And of course, all his sycophants who sit round there say, "Yes, Mr. Hales, yes, Mr. Hales, we'll sue the bastard, Mr. Hales." So then they go and find a lawyer and say, "Look, how can we sue? We want to sue this Lance Christie character for harassment." And the lawyer says to them, "Look, this is not a good idea. You haven't got a case. It won't go well for you." And the sycophants say, "Oh, yes, no, we're going to do it anyway against your advice because Bruce says we must sue him. Therefore, we go and sue him." No one would dare go back to Bruce Hales and say, "Oh, the lawyers say it's not going to work."
Did Lance ever try to subpoena Bruce Hales? Do you know?
No, Lance has never taken a case against the Brethren. No.
Right.
I mean, all he does in his mild way is he wants to reform the system. I mean, he just says, you need to change how you do things. He's all for reconciliation and all for opening the doors and breaking down the barrier of separation. He's not against it as a church. He still believes, his beliefs in religious terms are actually very close to the Brethren's belief system. Mm-hmm. He wants a reform, which is a laudable aim.
And to put it mildly, he's no stranger to controversy, right? Let me just put up this, and you can tell because I wasn't familiar with this until maybe a couple of weeks ago. But you sent me this: exclusive Brethren cult leader's millionaire son accused of assault. Give me an idea of what that is and what happened, because it made me fall in love with Lance a little bit more.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, Lance. I mean, just to give a little bit of Lance's background, he was a very successful businessman inside the Plymouth Brethren. He had a business making those little labels like you get on designer jeans, where the name of the brand is made of little stitches. And so when he actually got kicked out, unlike most people who get kicked out of the Brethren, when he got kicked out, he managed to retain, after a whole series of legal battles, he managed to retain, a decent sum of money. So he's one of the very few ex-Brethren who actually got some disposable cash to his hand, and he's been very, very generous to me and to a lot of other ex-Brethren. He's helped us out in, because when you leave the Brethren, you typically have nothing. So he's been extremely generous. He's helped a lot of people, and he decided when he was kicked out, he decided he was going to go on a world tour and meet up with all the ex-Brethren all around the world. So he had the time, he had the money. He literally traveled all the way around the world, meeting up with former Brethren members and hearing their stories and helping them out, and just trying to kind of get some coherence in the ex-Brethren movement, I suppose, is really his aim. And anyway, he went to Sydney, Australia, which is where Bruce Hales lives, and he met with an ex-Brethren member called Rowan Scott, and he decided to. Lance decided he was actually going to make a video outside of Bruce Hales' house.
In like a strip of forest or nature land beside the house.
Well, I think it's just the Australian term for basically the grass. Field?
Okay.
Well, no, it's an urban street, and so you've got the sidewalk, and then there's a strip of grass between the sidewalk and the road.
That's what they call a nature strip.
They call it a nature strip. Don't know why they have weird names. So yeah, it's a very posh but public urban street in Sydney. And so Lance is standing there in the public road outside Bruce Hales' house, and Rowan Scott is preparing to video him using his phone. So Lance has got a little speech he's going to make about, this is where the leader Bruce Hales lives, and I'm making an appeal to him to open the doors and let families be reunited. And they just launch into this, and suddenly Gareth Hales, who is Bruce Hales' oldest son, and Bruce Hales lives in a mansion next door to Bruce Hales' mansion. They've got these huge houses they've built for themselves. Gareth Hales comes hustling out of his house, and grabs Rowan Scott, and you can see in the picture here, the Rowan Scott's the guy with the beard in the front. Gareth Hales is the guy in blue behind, and that the hand in the foreground, that's Lance Christie, kind of putting up his hands in horror at the prospect of Rowan being throttled by Gareth Hales. Anyway, Gareth Hales tries to wrestle the phone away from Rowan Scott. Rowan wasn't going to let go of his phone, and Gareth got him by the back of his neck and bent him over double. So Rowan's now kind of folded in half. He's still hanging onto his phone. And Lance, who's the most kind of utterly inoffensive, the guy who would be furthest from doing anyone any violence, is kind of pleading with Gareth. He's saying, "No, Gareth, no violence, please. Let go of him."
Yeah.
And to Rowan Scott, he managed to hang on to his phone. But the joke is that all this time, the phone was videoing and recording. And so there's this amazing live, video of all this happening in real time. And you can see the phone kind of spinning around, and you can see Gareth gripping Rowan's neck. And you can hear Lance saying, "Gareth, no, let's talk about this,
Yeah, Lane, I see Lane Admiral in the comments. Lane, if you happen to have that video that you can email me, do so, and I'll see if I can play it during the show. But I just want to read a little piece of that article because I find it kind of both hilarious and crazy. Rowan Scott said he and another former member of the worldwide Christian sect, British man Lance Christie, had gone to the nature strip, a piece of grass between the sidewalk and the house, outside Bruce Hales' mansion in Trelawney Street, Eastwood, to record a video on the phone. Christie was intending to make a statement about his court battle with his family, who remained loyal to the Exclusive Brethren in the United Kingdom as they tried to force him to give up the business he founded in 1978 and ran for 40 years. They were unsuccessful in that, correct?
Well, he essentially got his half of the value of it after a massive battle, yeah.
Okay. It's just going to be repeating what you just said, but it's in the newspaper, so I just want to make it clear for people. However, the two men allege that Gareth Hales, whose mansion is next door to his father's, that's so Christ-like when they talk about their mansions side by side, came onto the nature strip and violently intervened as they prepared to record a video. When he saw the video, he tried to duck behind me, and then he lunged to grab the phone, Scott told the Sydney Morning Herald. It happened so fast, he grabbed my left arm first, going for the phone, and then grabbed my neck and pushed it down. He had one hand on my arm and one hand on my neck. When he grabbed me, I immediately said, "This is assault." Christie said he was also initially manhandled and that he saw Hales wrestled hard to get a hold of the phone. The incident lasted almost a minute, after which Christie persuaded Hales to let Scott go if he turned off the phone. "I walked away from him as quick as I could," Scott said. "I was feeling faint and thought I was going to collapse. Then another guy in a white shirt chased after me. He followed terribly close behind me, and I turned around and he actually bumped into me. He stood inches from my face and just stared at me. I could smell the reek of alcohol," which I don't know why I find that so funny. That these apparently pious people are constantly drunk, like all the time.
They are. Oh yeah.
Was it Lane that was telling me about how his? It could have been Lane. I can't remember who it was, but it might have been Lane telling me about how, or Beth. It was Beth Seed. Telling me how, like, because I made a joke about she's like, yeah, there's always a dining table that can seat 20 and everything. Yeah. And I'm like, and then do you have like a gigantic, like a whole wall filled with Johnny Walker? She's like, yeah.
Yeah. It's like a kind of an altar, there's three things actually that are characteristic of a Plymouth Brethren house. So you're in one. One is somewhere there will be a massive bookcase full of all their literature. The second thing is there will be a great big kind of canvas work of art on the wall, which is like portraits of the 7 great leaders of the church. And the third thing will be a massive dresser, absolutely crammed with expensive scotches and liqueurs and all the glasses and everything to make your drinks.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's good.
When I left the Brethren, I was kind of surprised when I started going into people's, regular people's houses, that they didn't have one of these things. I thought everyone in the world had one of these things.
How could you have a dining room that doesn't sit 20?
Yeah.
And it's not a round table, I'm imagining, because that would imply unity and equality, right?
Well, it'd have to be about 50 feet diameter. No, I mean, they typically have a table about 20 feet long. Well, we have one. I've had a whole series of them in my life. It was part of
I've had people ask me if there's any other pictures of Bruce Hales, because we always use, which one is it? We always use this one. But I just found one in that article.
Yeah.
It looks like it was taken the same day. Look. It's like.
Yeah, no, I should know. I mean, that one in the article was taken on a building, I think it was when they were doing some building work on one of the meeting rooms in Sydney. It's actually on a construction site. Okay. And that was in 2003, that last one, I think. That's actually an old photo. Yeah.
Did Rowan Scott sue?
No, he didn't. I don't know why. I mean, it was talked about for a long time, but eventually he didn't.
That would have been the very first thing I would. As soon as I left that nature strip, I would have gone immediately to a lawyer with my.
Well, I think he did. I think he did, but maybe there wasn't sufficient enough of a case. I mean, it would be, the Brethren would have got them. I mean, probably the answer is that Rowan Scott couldn't afford to sue. I mean, you need an awful lot of money to get up against those people.
Someone just said that they sent me the video in an article on Facebook. I don't have time to find the correct site to download Facebook videos unless I can just download it straight from there, and I'll try to do that because I think the video is worth watching. Also, I haven't received that email. Okay, so now Lance Christie has been acquitted. If he was doing the world tour while he had stuff going on legally with the Brethren, at least as far as his business goes, what can we expect from him now that he's been acquitted?
Well, he's set up some websites, and he's pretty active on social media. He takes a kind of an old-fashioned approach. He prefers sort of giving speeches rather than getting onto Twitter or Facebook as such. But yeah, I'm sure he'll continue to be I'm sure he'll continue to be very active in trying to expose them. But you never know with Lance. I mean, Lance is a man who's endlessly full of surprises. I mean,
Yeah, he's about to get on a plane to go to Dubai. So.
Yeah. I mean, trying to predict Lance is an inexact science.
Right. Did you have a lot of interactions with him when you were still inside?
Oh, I met him a few times. Yeah, I mean, his brother-in-law lived not far from me. I mean, in the adjacent town. So, and he used to come up, and see him at times. So yeah, when we were both in the Brethren, we met a few times. I didn't have much to do with him. No, and he was highly regarded, and he was always very entertaining. If he would come and they would ask him to preach or take a Bible reading, it was always very, very entertaining. It was always good fun. Yeah, he was very well known inside the Brethren. He was, everyone had heard of him.
Okay, I'm going to read another little piece of the article because I find it fascinating. In his closing remarks, the representative for the prosecution, Robert Campbell, said that there was a balancing act when looking at Christie's remarks of whether he had overstepped the mark. He said, where he oversteps the line is to email the people directly. That's crazy, that sending an email. And draw their attention to matters they don't want to hear. Like, I can't believe a lawyer said that out loud. The district judge overseeing the trial, Timothy Capstick, said that he had considered whether the contents of the information sent by Christie had been oppressive and unacceptable. He said, while each complainant was upset at what they saw or read, none could actually explain when invited to do so what he found oppressive or unacceptable. He said that he believed the defendants were genuinely distressed by the material, but rejected their reasons for reading it, saying, the explanations given are at best disingenuous. The reality is they knew the content was going to be unwelcome if they read it. This is amazing that a church that is so aggressive, so litigious, and so openly willing to do things like destroy families are upset that they had to read words.
Well, they didn't even have to read them. I mean, when Lance emails you, the email says in the line, Lance J. Christie. I mean, it's not that they didn't know who the emails were coming from.
Right.
So, I mean, if they didn't want to read it, they didn't have to open the email. They knew who the email was from.
It's amazing. Lane sent me the video, but it's just the one in the Australian piece. I can't get that, Lane, unless I have a subscription to that thing. But it's okay. We'll find the video. We'll get Lance back on. This is going to be a quick one. Is there anything else that you want to add to this? Because I think we're good for now until we get Lance on. Lance, by the way, for everyone listening, is hilarious. And I'm not trying to overhype this man. He is one of the most interesting characters I've ever spoken with in my entire life. And I'm not exaggerating. He's a top 5 guy for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
So we'll have him on as soon as possible. Richard Marsh, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, James.
Have a good one. Okay, guys. My apologies for not being able to have Lance Christie. If it gives you an idea of what it's like to be in the Brethren for most of your life, it took me about 5 minutes to teach him how to paste this morning, which I just find is just what makes him charming. So listen, we'll have Lance on again. I'm going to try to get Sam G on tonight. She's a digital content creator and a social media maven, I guess I would call her. And then tomorrow, the triumphant return of Casual Fridays. And so we will see you next time on Blackballed. Thanks, everybody.
Blackballed. 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 Blackballed.